Hello, Gaz Williams here for SonicLAB, looking at the brand new Novation circuit. So the circuit is a Groovebox. It's got 2 synth engines and 4 drum engines, so 6 tracks in total. You can record patterns in it and you can chain some patterns together. And so you can make fairly complete sounding music on it. The patterns can be 1 bar long up to 8 bars long. And that's quite a nice thing here. So we can just choose single patterns, or by a combination of holding a finger down, if I press 4, it'll play for 4 patterns or up to 8 patterns long. And they don't need to start from 1. You could start it from there, for instance. It's a well-made box. It's kind of made out of plastic, but it's very, very sturdy. The knobs feel good. There's a master filter on the end here, which is center indented for a low pass or a high pass. Looking at the back, we've got left and right on unbalanced 1/4 inch jacks. We've got MIDI on little mini jacks, but they do come with breakout adapters there for regular DIN plugs. We've got a USB socket, which is just for MIDI transmission, no audio, or there's no editor or computer, it's just purely for MIDI connectivity, and a power supply. So this thing won't run off USB power, you might be thinking. It does need a power supply, but there's 2 ways of powering it. One is with the included 12-volt adapter, or the other way of powering it is with batteries. And there's a little battery compartment here, and there's 6 AA batteries, which are down here. So if we look at the top panel, and we can see that there is lots and lots of coloured LEDs, and they're very, very nice. As you can see, when I change through the different modes, lots and lots of different colours. And then other modes, like as we mentioned, if we go into the pattern mode, you can see how those colours carry across. So there's a very logical layout to the colours, which actually makes it very pleasing to use. I like that very much. Mixer. Now the mixer is very simple in terms of whichever these knobs line up with are the faders for controlling the volume, and these buttons here are just simply mutes. We've got an effects mode where there's a delay and a reverb. They're like kind of presets. Take this bottom row here, this chooses the reverb from a very short reverb to a very long reverb, and then reverbs in between. And similarly, these knobs, which line up to these synth and drum buttons, indicate the send levels. And then to carry on down our little chain here, we've got our play and our record. Now one little thing I'd like to mention is that I think the record button really could do with being greyed out completely when it's not in use, because sometimes I've glanced at the record and I'm not sure if it's in record or not under certain lighting conditions. So I'd like to see that actually greyed out when it's not lit. I mean, obviously here you can see when it's in record mode, it's brightly lit, but that does affect what goes on if you are in record. Namely, if you happen to be tweaking a sound, you could actually inadvertently write some automation in. So automation is something that runs throughout the whole unit, and we can automate synth parameters, we can automate drum parameters, we can automate mixer levels, and we can also automate sends. So there's plenty of automation possibilities with this, and including real-time automation, there is also step automation, which a little bit like parameter locking, a little like the Electron approach. So we'll look at that in a moment too. The highest level is the sessions. So if I was to go to just like one of the demo ones, change to a different one. And something that's quite good here about the sessions is when you save a session, it will save with whatever tempo you put in. But when you are running sessions in play, if I call up my tempo, we can see that the pads actually tell us that we're running at 158 BPM. As I change here, we can see the BPM. Now if I change to a different pattern, like we can see the tempo remains the same. However, if I start the session again, the session will load at its saved tempo. So that's cool. It means that you can actually jump to any of your saved sessions and it'll play in your current tempo, providing you're in play. As I mentioned, you've got two synth modes, and each synth engine has got 6 voice polyphony. So when we notice now, when we're in a synth mode, the sort of performance area is split into 2 parts. It's split into a 16-step sequencer and a little playable surface, which is made up of 2 octaves of whatever key we're in. So speaking of keys, there's a scales button here, which lets us choose from this grid here, which represents a kind of keyboard. So C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and then here's the black notes along the top here. This is how we choose what key we're in, and then these buttons along the bottom here, they choose what scale. But what's super cool is that you can change the key on the fly. Let's go to another pattern here, something that I created earlier. So I come to my scales button. Let's go to like a major feel. Let's go. So it's quite nice. You can have like interesting musical adventures by just sequencing something and then being able to change, and as it changes it changes what both synth parts are playing, so it keeps everything always locked into current key. Now we can move up and down the octaves with these buttons here, and we've got quite a large range. We can see where the LEDs run out when we're at our highest possible note. Similarly, if we go down low, let's go and create a blank session. And if I start play, then we can see the 16 notes. And we can enter notes in 2 ways. I could do it step time. I could hold the step I want, choose shift and tempo, tap tempo, swing. I might want to put some hi-hats in. Let's back the swing down a little bit. Okay, so I might want to turn hi-hats down, so I go to the mixer. The mixer gives us a color-coded thing here. Take those hi-hats down a little bit. And we can also see how the LEDs underneath these controls change as well to indicate that as well. So that's a very nice touch. So let's look at these controls, because this is a contentious issue of this device. Basically, these are going to change our settings, our sound settings. But they're not labeled. They're macros. And in some cases, they can change numerous parameters at the same time. And you don't know what you're getting into. You really have to explore. And each patch has enormous amounts of sound within them. Now, that's pretty cool, but it's also a bit frustrating as well, because we don't actually know what these things are doing. But, like, let's come to synth, for instance. If I wanted to play a chord, so 4 is giving us a nice long release. Now let's change patch. Now we change patches by holding shift and hitting the relevant thing. So I'm going to change a different patch now. Synth. Changing 4 hasn't changed the release at all like it did on the other pattern, on the other patch. So it's a bit of a lottery. You're never quite sure what these things are doing. However, it's also pretty cool as well, because it does force you to experiment and to investigate what the sounds are. But, and here's another issue, this is something I find quite frustrating with it, is I can't audition the sounds by just simply selecting them. The only way that you can actually audition the sounds, I would need to sequence something in order to investigate. Surely it would be better when it's not in play for it just to make a sound of the root of whatever key that you're in, just so you could audition and find a sound. But that's the sort of thing that they could fix in an update, so I think that would be useful. However, what we can see is that when I'm in Synth 2, I can pick between these 32 different sounds, but I can actually access the sounds of Synth 1 by hitting octave down, and then I've got the 32 patches that are available to Synth 2. And of course, the same thing applies with Synth 1. If I was to choose Synth 1, the octave button toggles between the two banks. And let's say I spent a moment dialing in and finding a sound that I really liked. There's no way to actually save any of your sounds. The only way that you would save the sound is when you save the session. Whatever you've set the sound to, it would save that way. But if you wanted to then recall that sound in a different session, then it gets a little bit awkward. You can't copy sounds across patterns. You'd have to just create, well, and that's when you start hitting the kind of limitations. But these limitations are there also for a reason. And those limitations mean that the barrier to creating music is kind of, you find that you make music very, very easily on this device. And that's something that is quite commendable, because there's no menu structure. So, you and the device develop quite an intimate relationship quite early on, which I think is something quite nice with an electronic device. So quite a unique feature of the circuit is that Synth 1 and Synth 2 have these sidechain buttons. Now, sidechaining has become such a popular thing in modern music production, so to see it in quite a prominent role here is quite interesting. But what does a sidechain do? Well, the sidechain allows for the Synth 1 and Synth 2 to be affected by whatever is sequenced in drum 1. So drum 1 will essentially kind of duck the synth. But there's different sidechain patterns. Let's have a listen. So we've got like 8 presets. Now if I go to drum 1 now and change, so you can hear the synth skipping now. Off, on. So useful for those kind of pumping modern techniques. Now, speaking of sounds, we've looked at some of the synth sounds. Let's have a little look at the drum sounds. So the drum sounds work in a way that when we're in our note mode, if I was to start running, let's just mute everything here and turn our drum sounds on. Okay, so we can see here, drum 3 is sounding on every step. Let's just put bog standard drum beat in. Okay. So if I wanted to change patches, change sounds, shift drum 1 gives me 16 different kicks. But I don't have to just keep kicks on one. I could have, I've got 16 snares here, and similarly to the way the synths work, if I hit the octave button, it gives me another 32. Now these ones are the ones that are defaulted to drums 3 and 4. But what this means is that you can have any of the drum sounds on drum 1, drum 2, drum 3 and drum 4. They're not limited to being kick, snare, hi-hat, etc. If we were just to investigate a sound, I'm going to go shift and note mode. Gives us a little performing pad here. What we've got here is the top row control sound drum 1, and this row contain the sound of drum 2. And unlike the synth modes, these are fixed. So we've got pitch, we've got kind of length, we've got distortion, which gets quite nasty when you turn that up, and also it's like some sort of filter as well. And between those controls, you can find loads and loads of different sounds within one patch. I'd have liked to have seen maybe just 8 kicks, 8 snares, and more esoteric percussion sounds. Let's get a kick on the go, and let's just put a load of snares in. I just randomly, just all sorts of snares. Okay, now you think, hey, that's cool. You can't sequence patch changes, which I think is a shame, because I think that would have made it really cool and would have got around that kind of 4-drum limit. As I mentioned, we build patterns like so, and in this split mode, the way that we can just I could hold a step down. And now these, I can go, if I press gate, I can choose the gate length here, up to 16 steps per gate. Similarly, velocity works in the same sort of way. I hold the step down, I can set what I wanted it to be. Let's make all these really quiet and make the first one really loud. Now, if I go into record, this is one of the great strengths of this device. With record, we can see that the LEDs go red to indicate that they're actually recording. So you can see that this is a very powerful feature, being able to just get these steps going. So that's really cool, and that works for the synth, but it also crucially works on the drums. You can do the same thing. Let's just turn our hi-hats on. Go into record. And then it's quite nice because if I go through the steps, you can actually hear what the sound of each step is. And if you notice that the LED lights, they change slightly, which indicate the intensity that any of these parameters are set to. So if I just create a fresh session here, I'm going to go to Synth 1. Let's go to Expanded Note View. I'm going to give ourselves a little bit of, put some hi-hats in, so I've got something to play to. Full mode here, and record a pattern. Okay, basic little pattern. Go to pattern mode, hold down duplicate, hit that pattern, bam, 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 bam. I've copied that pattern now across, so we can see it's moving through my identical patterns, which is quite a cool way of doing stuff, because when you start automating so the pattern recording records those automations across all the pattern changes. If I was just to play one pattern on its own, whatever automation that was recorded in that cycle would just be repeated. So if I was just to go to pattern 2, let's mute so we just hear pattern 2. Okay, we've got effects that we can use. Delay and reverb. They're sort of presets, but you've got like 8 presets of each. So if I choose like short reverbs, this bottom row represents reverb. Reasonable reverb, these knobs now which line up. So I can apply reverb here. Let's put some delay on the hi-hats. And like there, for instance, You can hear some of them, the delays have got different effects. This one's got more of a ping pong effect. Okay, now if I was to change the synth sound, what we also notice is, as the pattern has changed, the automation has also saved. So our new sound has got the automation that we recorded on the previous sound. What's quite nifty though, if I hold clear and twist any of the knobs, you can actually delete the automation from just that parameter that way. So that's quite cool. So if I get my little pattern playing now, I can go to nudge, and I can nudge it forward and backwards, the pattern. So that allows you to sort of jam with your pattern a little bit and slide it around. But also, you can change the pattern length. It's running the full 16. Let's just make a pattern 1 loop. So pattern 1 now is 1 beat long. Let's go to pattern 2, and we'll make pattern 2 4 beats long. And we'll make pattern 3 the full length. So now we can see what 1 beat, 2 beat, 4 beats. So you can set the pattern lengths to change on the synths, but you can't actually change the pattern length. The pattern length button goes grey when you go to the drum mode. So the drum patterns are stuck to 16 beats long, which is a real shame because, you know, if we could do, say, 12 beats, we could do sort of 3-4 rhythms. It also stops us doing polyrhythms with the drum mode, which I think is a bit of a shame because that's a really exciting part of step sequencing, being able to change that sort of thing. Phew! Lots of information there. Sorry, I'm to speed through it, but I mean, this deceptively simple device is actually quite deep, and you know, once you start to delve into it, wow, can do all sorts of interesting things. So there is a mode if I hold down Shift and turn it on, where I can do a few MIDI settings. Here, for instance, I can set whether it's using its internal clock or whether it's on auto, that'll just instantly start listening to any incoming clock via the MIDI. And here I can turn on whether it receives and transmits MIDI. Now what's cool is if I turn off the MIDI transmit, it still sends clock. So if I was to connect it to something like a Volca, then I could send clock, because these have got sequencers built in, so I don't necessarily want this to send notes to this, but it will still send clock. So that's really cool. So it will work very well if you wanted to connect it to your existing devices, such as the Volca series. Now you see, here's the Launchpad Pro. I'm coming out MIDI via mini jack, going into mini jack. Well, at least it works. But, so you see, I can play. I should mention one thing, by the way, that this does not respond. It doesn't have any aftertouch on side, and it doesn't respond to any aftertouch either. But, so if I'm using this, or any MIDI controller to play the thing, if I was to go into record mode, nothing. I can play it, but it doesn't sequence the incoming MIDI. And another thing that's worth mentioning is, if I play chromatically on the Launchpad Pro, we can see that it is actually locking to whatever key I'm in. So it's filtering the notes, but it's not actually recording the notes. So that's a little bit puzzling why it won't do that. Again, maybe a firmware update can fix that. But here's an unexpected little thing I discovered, that if you put step automation in, so each step has a different sound, whatever the MIDI is playing will play what the current step is set to. So for instance, So it's almost like a bank of 16 presets that you could use. So I can see some use for that in a live setting. So this wraps up our review of the Novation circuit, and I think it's a terrific, bold and exciting new device that Novation should be commended for taking that step. I think the beautiful lighting and the visual aspect to it makes it a joy to use, and the lack of a screen is largely not an issue at all. I think its build quality is great for the money, and speaking of the money, it's around $249 street price UK, £249, and about $329 US. So it's not going to break the bank, but for that price, you could actually buy 3 Volcas more or less, a Volca Beats, a Volca Bass and a Volca Keys, which would give you a similar arrangement. And for around 70 UK pounds more, that's when you're looking at the nearest rival, as far as I can see, which is the Korg Electribe series. The Korg Electribe series do have quite a few more features on them, but there is a £70 premium on that. But they do actually have a very different workflow, I should hasten to add. Now, so it's available now. It's, yeah, it's a really fun thing. I mean, I don't think for some experienced synthesizer players, they may be very frustrated by this seemingly lottery aspect to approaching the macros. But I guess for many other people, that is one of the great strengths of it as well. So it's definitely a bit of a Marmite product in that respect. I think some people are going to love it and some people maybe not so keen. I definitely love it. I think it's brilliant, and it really works really well with my other devices and provides a really exciting and different approach to music making. I'm Gaz Williams. This is Sonic State. Over and out. Oh yeah, there's one thing I forgot to mention, the built-in speaker. Okay, it might not win hi-fi awards, but it's great that it's there, and it really contributes to the device being a mobile music making machine. Bye for now.